Me, I was just this dude just came from Kmart. I'm like, yo, like, what's going on? I'm in the house, like, so even in the black tech circle, I was still an outsider. You know what I'm saying? Just off of that, I was just like, yo, like, I felt like a fish out of water.
Welcome to Behind the Work, the show where we dive deep into the business, life, and careers of people doing some amazing things in the world. I'm your host, Jessica Santana, and I'm bringing you the stories behind the sexy and unsexy parts of success. So whether you're working at a company, building your business, or you're just trying to level up, this is for you. At Behind the Work, we believe that we all have to go up together, so make sure you're tapped in. Today, we have the great pleasure of talking with one of my favorite people in the entire world, Anthony Frasier. Anthony is the CEO and founder of ABF Creative, a media company specialized in multicultural audio content for kids and families. Starting out right after high school, Anthony followed a unique entrepreneurial path, going from being a leading pioneer in the Black tech ecosystem to educating fellow entrepreneurs as one of the co-founders of the Phat Start-up, to being an entrepreneur in residence at Newark Venture Partners, and then ultimately becoming an award-winning podcast producer. So Anthony's career has been a true testament of what happens when hustle meets opportunity, and we are so excited to have him today. Anthony, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here, and you know my bio better than I do. That's crazy. Um, I'm like, you word it so well. I'm like, yo, let me borrow that when we done. Like, I don't tell it that well, and that's something I got to work on. I'm being vulnerable here. Like, I need to tell my story better for sure.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because honestly, Anthony, I will dive in deep into questions and stuff, but for the sake of providing context, Anthony is someone that I've known since 2014 when I became an entrepreneur. I remember being like, I want to do something dope. I want to build something from scratch. And when I was on Twitter, when Twitter was Twitter, right? I
Right.
remember being like, who is doing the things that I want to do? And I remember running into the Phat Start-up online at the time. And I remember being like, yo, this is the dopest thing in the world. And I know we'll talk about what the Phat Start-up was and stuff, but, Anthony has just been such a phenomenal person. To see his growth, to see his entrepreneurial path over the last several years has been really amazing. And I just really have learned so much from him. And so for everyone who's tuning in, make sure that you turn your volumes up because this man is about to drop all of the gems. But the one thing I will say that I really have always loved about you, Anthony, is that you really are the type of person that really breathes the ethos of what hustle looks like when it meets opportunity. Because when you think about your background, you think about where you're from, you think about what you represent, like there's not a lot of people like us that are in these same spaces. And so I just wanna say I'm really happy to have you. And I know this conversation is gonna be great.
Oh no, I know it too. This is dope. Like, and I'm super proud of the moves you've been making. Um, it's blowing me away, and just kind of seeing how large your organization has become from those humble beginnings to now the impactful work you're doing in multiple cities at that, not even just New York. Um, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, congrats to you for sure for just
Thank
being
you.
having a vision and taking it as far as it has. Because yeah, we've seen a lot of people come and a lot of
Mhm,
people aren't here anymore. A lot of people aren't
mhm.
able to sustain and so for you to make it and persevere, that says a lot about you and not only just you, but the people you surround yourself with too.
Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And when I think about longevity, like you are one of those people that I think about entrepreneurial longevity with. One of the things I've always admired about you, which I said before, was your hustle. Especially when I was coming up as an entrepreneur, it was really important for me to see people that look like me doing the things that were just dope. And I remembered when I first learned about you, you were already doing the Phat Startup, but upon my research, I realized that the Phat Startup actually was not your first company. Like your first company, from what I remember, was a company called Played back in
Yeah.
2011. Which I really think was your first step into entrepreneurship. And so Tell us about what your life looked like what this was 14, 15 years ago, and
Yeah,
why you decided to start an entrepreneurial path, and what was played and what was going on at the time where you were like, this is
right.
my route.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wow. I'm gonna try my best to make it as brief as possible. But I grew up as a video game lover. I love video games so much. That's why I almost failed high school because I was cutting class. Um, just to go to my boy's house and we could play some, PlayStation. And this is like when PlayStation 2 first came out and all this other stuff. So it's just like, just a big gamer. And so after high school, um, I ended up in Essex County College, and then I ended up dropping out of college. And so the only thing I was doing was going to work, which was at Kmart, and then going home and talking about video games in this, message forum or whatever. So me and a few guys from the forum, we ended up making a website because we found out that we were bringing that site so much traffic.
Mhm.
We were the number one part of the forum. We was like, wait, why don't we make our own website? Why we up here helping this guy eat off Google ad money? Like we could be getting this ad money ourselves. So we formed a group called the Coalition, and created a website called thecoalition.com with a K. And it's a video game website that was made by black gamers and multiracial gamers who just wanted to give our opinion, talk about the things that we thought was cool and we thought was dope, and just giving our perspectives. At the time there wasn't really a lot. Right now you see a whole bunch of black gamers on YouTube talking and giving their opinions about games, etc. But back then that was rare. It was so rare that when we talked about it, we would actually get we would just almost met with racist responses immediately, from the community, from the gaming community. So it was just like we were really truly like pioneering in that space. But it didn't pay. It was something that didn't really pay a lot. Like the money we would earn from the ads, it was sneaker money at most, money to get you some new pair of Jordans or new pair. Like we didn't make no real money doing that. And we were getting like over 100,000 unique visitors a month, which is pretty good for a website at that time. Even a website today can earn that makes 100,000, visitors can do pretty well. And so, but we wasn't really making that much money. So we had to split it up. So I eventually, I was in the library one day and I saw that there was this company called Bubbleline that was looking for interns. And so I ended up applying for that internship. At first they didn't want me, but then when they saw what I built with the coalition, they were like, well, you didn't go to college, but we saw that you built the independent website and it's getting more traffic than ours, so we'll hire you. So they hired me. And they hired another college intern too, just in case I didn't work out. And so I did so well that they was like, yo, we want to offer you a business development position at this company. And so I said, hell yeah, I'll do it. And so that was my that's how I got into the tech industry. Through this internship. And then at this startup, they gave me a biz dev position. So that startup was failing, long story short. And I saw that there was people on Twitter talking about this new black tech accelerator. And so the startup was failing, but I was like, yo, I got a really good idea. I think we can leverage some of the technology instead of scrapping the technology from the startup. Let's move it and be into a niche category of gaming and have it to where we're like rating video games instead of trying to rate places. Because the way it worked for the company was like they were rating places that you visited. They were ahead of their time, to be honest, like giving like sentiment ratings and was collecting all of this sentiment data. And I was like, well, in the gaming industry, they're really passionate and they're always sentiment. There's so much sentiment data to collect. Why don't we make this niche and I can create a whole new company, salvage some of the technology that y'all built and put it into what I'm doing. They agreed to do it. And then I applied for this accelerator on Twitter when they was tweeting about it, called New Me Accelerator. They say it's the first black tech accelerator in Silicon Valley. And I applied with the idea, which was played, which you're talking about. And 3 weeks later, they gave me a call and said, yo, you're in. And that's how I ended up launch and play. That's a very short version of the story. But
Mhm.
yeah, like it was just leveraging opportunity. That was the story of my life. I would try to use one opportunity to leverage to get into the next, to leverage to get into the next. Nothing's truly trash. You can't get rid of everything. Like you got to use that to get you to the next level. And so that's what I was able to do.
Mhm, mhm. And so let's talk about it though, because like what you're talking about, like we gotta set context for people. Like this was 2011, y'all. Like this was 2011, 2012. Like the movement of around like diversity, equity, and inclusion in tech, like it was just starting to
Just
pick
started.
up. Yeah, it was just
Yeah.
starting to pick up. And I think that played was really a moment for you because as because you got to think about it, like Anthony, think about your profile from Jersey. You're black, you're not formed, like you dropped out of college. You get what I'm saying? Like people at that time don't realize, like everyone who was playing well, or at least getting to play at all within the Silicon Valley ecosystem, these were like Harvard grads, Stanford grads, right? Like
Yeah.
people with a lot of privilege and pedigree. And you know, when I remember when I learned about you and I learned about Played as a company and you going through the New Me Accelerator, I remember doing the research and the company just caught so much attention, right? Like you as a black man leading this startup caught so much attention. You got featured on CNN,
Yeah.
TechCrunch, Mashable, and even journalists like Soledad O'Brien,
Yeah.
wanted to tell your story. And so, what would you say about Black tech entrepreneurship then that is different than Black tech entrepreneurship now?
That's a good question. I will say this. So I was even an outsider with the new me, within the accelerator.
Mm.
When I flew out to accelerator, when I flew out to Silicon Valley in the house, they had us all staying in the house. Everybody was going around giving their introductions, and you had master programmers, you had people who graduated from MIT from the highest levels. You had
Mhm.
another guy who sold the company before. You had like me. I was just this dude just came from Kmart. I'm like,
Mhm.
yo, like what's going on? I'm in the house,
Mhm.
like so. Even in the
Mhm.
black tech circle, I was still an outsider. You know what I'm saying? Just off of that, I was just like, yo, like I felt like a fish out of water. Then we would go to these events in Silicon Valley where I'm the only black person in the room. And so like it's like I was like a double fish out of water. I was a fish out of water inside the home that I was in. And then I was a even bigger fish out of water when going out into the actual Silicon Valley community to network, to
Mhm.
place myself in these places and trying to do all these different things. So it was definitely a scary situation, but I used to always repeat this mantra to myself, which was um, if I'm not scared, then the opportunity isn't big enough. I used to say that a lot.
Mm. Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
was like my way of just kind of like tricking myself into being bold in the situation, being bold in the moment, because I needed it. I wasn't bold. I was very scared, but I knew
Mhm.
that if I didn't do this, I'm still gonna be at home.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna be at home. I'm gonna be asking people for money. I'm gonna
Mhm.
be sleeping on the couch. I'm gonna
Mhm.
be broke. So I'm like, look, I gotta do what I gotta do in this situation. I gotta trick myself out of who I used to be.
Mhm.
And I need to put myself in who I need to be
Mhm.
for this
Mhm.
very moment. And so that was my way of kind of instantly tricking myself. And so yeah, I mean, being the difference between black tech then and black tech now, um there are some changes and there's some things that haven't changed.
Mhm.
I'll just put the most obvious thing out there. What hasn't changed is black people getting more money.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
hasn't changed. Like
Mhm.
literally the numbers are almost the same then as they are now.
Yep.
It's almost crazy in some ways that's still the case.
Mhm.
And so and you would think it wasn't the case because you hear about so many black VCs and so many black fund managers, and there was like a moment, seemed like there was a moment, right? And then I'm
Mhm.
like, when the numbers have come out, You're like, what? Where was the moment? Like, what happened?
Mhm.
Like, why aren't we getting funded still? Um, so that hasn't changed. But technology and access to technology and access to um, ways to level the playing field has changed.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is like there was a big deficit in programming and learning how to program and things like that. And thanks to organizations like yours and others, now, young people get access to learning how to program, learning, getting hands-on internships, things that they weren't able to get access to before. But that's what's different. And so,
Mhm.
what you're doing is making a difference because now you're giving access was literally, it was money and access.
Mhm.
Money still kind of remains the same, but access has increased. Like
Mhm.
access and exposure to the careers that we didn't even know existed,
Mhm.
access and exposure to the skill sets we didn't even have the ability to even train for, let alone know it existed, but we didn't even know how to get trained for those opportunities. Internships. Now that AI is like becoming more popular, these are things that you can learn online for free. You don't necessarily need anyone. So, like, even in the crypto space, you're seeing a lot of Black people get into the crypto space a lot more, the blockchain a lot more. And so, like, that access is like opening the doors for opportunity. And the great thing about getting that access is that people create their own opportunities. And so, that's always good. So I'd say that's the biggest difference. Um, I've had some friends who've seen success in the tech industry and I see them give back in certain ways. So that's a difference. When I was coming up, we didn't know any. I only knew the most successful person I knew that was Black was the guy who was in the New Me Accelerator with me. I'm like, you sold the company, bro? Like
Mhm.
that to me was the most amazing thing, is the fact that this guy had sold a company. His name was Hank. And
Mhm.
so rest in peace to Hank. I think he passed away a couple years ago. But yeah, man, that was pretty much the biggest difference.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, well, so one, thanks for that, because I think that that's actually so resonant with me. Like I can actually say that, VC dollars just trends over the years, like it really hasn't moved. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you're correct in that the opportunity to learn, to figure out like what kinds of things are required in order for you to enter tech. I think the distribution of information is definitely out there now,
Yeah.
in a way that even when I was starting, that really wasn't readily accessible, which is why I started AOT, because I was like, yo, like people in this industry are making bread. Like I need to
They
make
make it
sure
bread.
I need to
Right.
make sure that my community knows that this is an opportunity. So I appreciate you providing that context.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned previously was around your mantra, right? And the kinds of things you had to tell yourself in order to stay resilient, in spaces where you were the only Black person, or stay resilient in spaces where even among Black people, you still felt like, oh, wow, like I'm a little bit more different here, right? And
Right.
so I would like to believe that it was these experiences, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I would like to believe that it was these experiences that led you to create the Fast Startup. And for those of you who are just getting to know Anthony, the Fast Startup was an integrated media company that produced premium content for all levels of entrepreneurs. It is how I found out about Anthony. And so tell me a little bit about, your transition from being like, all right, this was my time in Silicon Valley. I'm going back to the East Coast. I'm starting the Fast Startup. Like, tell me, what was your motivation for that, and what gaps were you seeing around Black and Brown founders at the time, where you were like, this is a necessary resource?
Yeah, yeah. Good question. Good question. When I left Silicon Valley, and by the way, it was very hard to leave. I'll be honest. It was very hard to leave for that because I had access at that moment now. I had
Mhm.
access.
Mhm.
So, video game companies, stuff like that. I've known people, they're like, oh yeah, you should apply here, come work here and make 100K and make 100K there. And then I'm like, damn, yo, it was tempting. I ain't gonna lie.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
was tempting. But I eventually came back. I think when I came back, I launched my company Play, but we eventually had to shut down because we had a big partnership with a company named THQ, and they went bankrupt right before we launched our partnership. And so I kind of just chose to just leave the company because I didn't really like my investor at the time. So we was like, yeah, let me just leave this. I don't want to be in that situation. So I found myself going to a lot of hackathons. And there was one hackathon in particular called Startup Weekend. I don't even know if they
Mm-hmm.
do Startup Weekends anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
the premise of Startup Weekend is you go in and you build a startup over the weekend when they partner and they put you with two other people, and then you guys have to come up with a viable company idea, even with like some kind of prototype by the end of the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was fun, but I volunteered. So I wasn't part of the startup weekend. I was a volunteer. And my co-volunteer who was with me, helping me work the front desk, was a guy named James Lopez. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were together. We were like, look, we ain't really part of the program, but let's build something anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
so we started talking about hip hop and how much we love hip hop and how they're building a startup is almost the same. It kind of borrows a little bit from hip hop culture. When you think about the merry-go-round and how they created humongous records just from this small 30-second loop they kept spinning over and over again, we kind of compare that to like finding a niche market, and then now you're making an entire industry out of finding something small within something within a larger picture. So that was like finding a niche market in a sense. So we love that we were able to find these comparisons and these metaphors from how hip hop was built to how startups are built. And then also we love the fact that a lot of startup founders were hip hop fans in general. Like a lot of them were listening to Jay-Z, Ben Horowitz at the time used to always put like some kind of rap quote before he wrote a blog post.
Mm-hmm.
And so like a lot of founders that we met in the space were really hip hop influenced, whether they were white, black, Latino, or Asian, it didn't matter. They were all fans of hip hop. So we felt like we had something. We were like, yo, let's make a website where we explore all of those avenues, where we explore the avenues of the comparisons, where we explore the avenues of the love of hip hop culture, and we just start interviewing people. And so it took off. We started to create. First, we started just like this, interviewing people through the internet, having conversations, and posting them to Twitter. And then we started doing meetups, and people started to come to those meetups, and then those meetups would sell out to the point where we were like, "Yo, we think we could do a conference." And then
Mm-hmm.
we ended up doing the conference called Tech 808. And then that started to sell out. We did them twice in New York City. We did one in Atlanta, did one in DC, did one in Oakland. So it just became this movement. And we was really proud of that. So that's sort of the story of the Phat Start-up.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? To be honest with you, when I think about the Fast Startup, I think this was like to today, Anthony. Like, I actually think this is like this has been one of the most phenomenal ideas that I've ever seen come out of somebody's brain. Because to provide context, y'all, like the Fast Startup, he's being very humble. It wasn't just that he was doing interviews online. No, like he and James, like they got people like Alexis Ohanian, Gary Vee, Ben Horowitz to like leave their homes, go to a space in New York City and talk to the culture, right? And then with the Tech 808 conference, like they ended up getting NYU to give space. They ended up getting people like Young Guru to come and
Oh
give
yeah,
a
yeah,
talk.
yeah. We had Guru. We had a lot of people.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
like this
we had
wasn't
some decent
little.
people. Yeah, 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 yeah. We had some decent people. You know what it was? We kind of knew people loved what we were doing, and that
Yeah.
that got their attention essentially. Like, and
Mhm.
then we would get people. We would find out when they were going to be outside. So a lot of times, these people had books coming out. Like Ben Horowitz had a
Mhm.
book coming out. Alexis had a book coming out. So we leverage those kind of things too, where we're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, let's get them on stage, and then that
Mhm.
will credibility would work with like people like Young Guru and all these other people
Mhm.
they see those Gary V types and they want to be next to them. And so they'll be like, yeah, we come and do the interview. So it was just like, yo, just really just leveraging communities. Like, and then, yeah, we got a lot of sponsors earlier. AT&T ended up sponsoring us.
Mhm.
I did a commercial with AT&T. They put me on a commercial.
Mhm.
that aired on television. That was pretty cool. So we got a lot of different little opportunities that came out of the Phat Start-up for sure. So
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, it was the first time where someone was like speaking to my interests, right? Like I think earlier, I think
mm,
at some point I was just like, I'm like boardroom Betty at work, but then I'm like Cardi B at home. Like, how do I integrate all this? And it felt like such an authentic space to me as like a brown girl from Brooklyn to just be able to go and talk about my professional interests, but then hear dope hip hop music in the background. You know what I'm saying? And I
that means a lot to
remember
me.
say it
That was
again?
our goal. That meant a lot to me
Yeah.
because that was literally our
Yeah.
goal, to have you feel safe.
Yeah, yeah, it was such a safe space, and even through these conferences, y'all, like there's the value that they were providing in the content, right? But Anthony, I would even say there was like a lot of value in being able to connect with people that look like you, that doesn't make you feel like you're alone. Because there was a point where I was like, there's no way that I could be like the only Puerto Rican girl that listens to hip hop and also likes tech. Like, there's no way. And so the
Right.
community just brought all these dope people together that are still in my life today. Like I think about like Christina Murillo, for example, like that's somebody that I met through the Fast Startup that has just been so dope over the years, right? And
Wow.
so, I will say that that was definitely a movement, and and
Yeah.
and so like when you think about why you wanted to do this, right? Like, what were the things that you were even seeing among people where you were like, okay, this conversation I'm gonna have with like Alexis, or this conversation I'm gonna have with Gary Vee is important. Like, what do you think they were providing in terms of information that you thought was gonna be helpful in closing the gap for your audience at the time? Like, what was it that they didn't know that was the value you believe you were providing them?
Great question. I think from our point of view was like our goal was to be, we were translators.
Mhm,
That's the way I would kind of say, like,
mhm,
because a lot of what will happen in the tech world wasn't resonating with
mhm,
our community. And so our goal was to be translators. So when we would get like a Ben Horowitz on stage, or Gary Vee, or Noah Kagan, or all these different people, our goal was like, yo, let's ask questions that make sense.
mhm,
Let's ask questions for that mom, that single mom that has to work, still take care of her kid, but she has this idea that she wants to get off the ground. Let's ask it from that perspective.
mhm,
You know what I'm saying? And like, let's not beat around the bush. Like, let's
mhm,
ask it from the perspective of our community. And I think that's how we provided value for the attendees and the listeners and the viewers, but how we exchange that value for like the people like a Ben Horowitz and Gary Vee. They didn't have access to these people.
mhm,
They weren't in front of black and brown audiences. They
mhm,
they they never were. And
mhm,
so through us, they felt like, oh wow, I feel like I'm actually getting an opportunity to talk to them.
mhm,
And some of these individuals weren't, like for instance, we even had Jason Calacanis, who's a
mhm,
humongous Trump supporter right now, like one
mhm,
of the biggest, probably arguably one of the men who got him elected. He put it,
mhm,
got Elon. He's buddies with Elon as well now.
mhm,
So we had some really interesting people talking to the community. I'm be honest, like
mhm,
those are gems. And so at the end of the day, a gem is still a gem. Whatever we can grab that helped them get to the next level, they got an opportunity to use us as a translator and be able to communicate that to an audience that they'll never, never gain access to.
mhm,
Even to this day, I can arguably say none of those, and maybe with the exception of Gary Vee, none of those individuals to this day has ever spoken widely to this kind of audience. The closest I see today of kind of with that same kind of vibe is like Earn Your Leisure. I would think.
mhm. Yeah.
When I look at Earn Your Leisure and I look at like how they're bringing a lot of high profile individuals to the community today, that kind of reminds me of the vibe that we had back then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I agree with that. And I think one of the things that you're hinting on, I love that you use the word translation because I don't think people realize like how important it is to be culturally relevant when you're trying
Mm,
to communicate messages to multicultural audiences. You know, you can't say the same thing to A that you can say to D
right,
and then
right.
think it's going to be the same thing. And I think in tech, we tend to try and use language that is cool and is standard for the industry. But when you're thinking about folks that have not even stepped foot in the industry, it actually can feel like a huge barrier to entry that can be a demotivator for us to even want to start exploring these kinds of spaces. And so, you know, I think that for me, I love that you used, you know, being a translator as like the purpose of what the Fast Startup was. Because when I think about it, I definitely think that that's exactly the purpose that the company was serving at the time.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
so, you know, after the Fast Startup, you know, you guys decided to sunset the initiative, but you were still on a roll, Anthony. Like you were still on a roll. Like every day, I'm like, yo, does this man sleep? Like, it's just like you were building courses, like you were just doing so many things. But I think after the Fast Startup, the thing that I remember the most was that you started a book. You were like, I'm
Oh,
writing a
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah.
And you started a self-published book, and you were like, I'm gonna just write. And I remember being like, yo, who just gets up one day and is like, I'm gonna start a book? And I was just like, Anthony Frasier does. And so, for those of you who don't know, Anthony wrote a book called Don't Dumb Down Your Greatness. It was self published and it really focused on inspiring entrepreneurs. And so, Anthony, throughout the theme of your career, you have always found a way to marry your interests about what you were learning about being independent to also drop gems on the community on like how do you navigate these kinds of spaces, and how do you actually navigate entrepreneurship. So tell us why you felt at that time it was important for you to write that book, because at this point in your career you had nothing to prove, right? Like at this point in your career you were already proven, you know what I'm saying? You were with the best of the you were with the best of the best. But and at that point, when people get to that point, I think a lot of times they're like, yo, I don't got really nothing to contribute here. I've left it all on the table. I don't gotta be of service to anybody. But you still were like, I gotta write this book. So tell us about why it was important for you to write this book. And you know, tell us like what inspired the content and why focus on entrepreneurs of color specifically, because I remember the book was for entrepreneurs, but I think the
Yeah.
way that you wrote it was really for us.
Yeah, yeah, I think, no, on the cover, it says the Young Black Entrepreneurs Guide to Being the
Okay, yeah.
right now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I spoke for y'all. I spoke to y'all. But the content in the book is very universal. Let me rewind though. And the reason why, well, you might know this more than you're an entrepreneur, so you know this. There was more. Like whatever I've done with the Fast Startup, I'm
Mhm,
very happy to have been able to do what it was. But I didn't choose to end the Fast Startup. There was just circumstances that
mhm,
led to the end of the Fast Startup. There's family and there's people had to make some hard choices. And so for me, um, I wasn't done, you know.
mhm,
I still felt like there was more I had to do in the world. And even today, I still feel that way. Like, and so um I read a book by an author named Tim Sanders.
mm,
And it's a pretty outdated book now. Like if you read it today, it's probably a lot of outdated stuff. It might seem a little, but it was called Love is the Killer App.
mm.
And in the book, and I'm writing another book, by the way. I'm in the, hopefully I can get a book deal for this. But uh
Put it out there. Let's speak it into
look, I gotta
existence.
build my platform first. You helping me break my silence and build my platform. But I'm one of the things he taught was how being like helping people is your way to earn influence, earn
Mhm,
power, earn connections, earn opportunities, earn, all these different things. And so that resonated so much with me. And I was like, yo, I'm not done yet. Like, how can I continue to contribute and help young people learn what I've learned? because I think it's another quote that I used to hear, which is, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." And
Mm.
I just felt like, yeah, at the time in 2016, I didn't know shit. I think about it now, and I'm like, yo, I really didn't know shit
Mhm,
compared to where I'm at now. But I
mhm,
still wrote the book because I know in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I was a one-eyed man in the land of the blind, which is a lot of young people who didn't know about this entrepreneurship stuff. So
mhm,
I wrote the book for them. And
mhm,
I was like, yo, I'm gonna drop gems about how to how to deal with failure, how
mhm,
to deal with patience,
mhm,
how to how to think about success a little differently, how to, just these things that nobody taught me. I was like, yo, like I gotta teach you.
mhm,
Um and hopefully this helps. And so yeah, that's what inspired me to put the book out. And yeah, I did it independently just because why not? I had that entrepreneur spirit and I thought I could sell a bunch of copies on my own. And I did. I ended up selling like a good, maybe like 5,000 copies of that book. Um, Maybe more than that. I mean, I think the last time I counted it was 5,000, and the last time I counted was like 4 years ago.
mm,
So, who knows how many copies I might have sold today, but definitely, independently released. And yeah, people still bring it up to me today. It's sold in black bookstores. It's sold. People buy them in bulk. When I go speak, sometimes people buy them. As a matter of fact, even if you go to my Instagram, there was a school in Newark that bought a whole bunch for the students. And it's in school libraries. A teacher hit me up and said, "Hey, my class is reading your book for our project." And so this still surprises me even till today that it's making as much impact as it is. But I think there's something about giving back or giving service that a lot of people are missing.
mhm,
A lot of people don't understand. They think it's me, 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 me. A lot of
mhm,
people have me, me energy. But what they don't realize is that in order to make me important, you got to help other people.
mhm,
Service is they ask me, what's the secret, Anthony? Service.
mhm,
Service is the secret. That's
mhm,
the big secret. What makes me different from the other people is the fact that I'm willing to give.
mhm,
And by giving, that's how I receive.
mhm.
And so
Yes.
I kind of made them the same thing. Giving and receiving is the same thing. But some people haven't realized that yet. So I want to be able to write more and teach people that service is the secret.
Yeah. Oh man, honestly, that resonates with me so much. When I think about like what I even want my own personal legacy to be on this earth is like I don't want to be someone who sat idle and was able to build up a success for herself and then left a whole bunch of people behind. And so I think what you're hinting at, Anthony, is the power of what we actually get when we lift as we climb. And I do think that, like, in a society where capitalism is resonant and everyone is just chasing the bag, that they tend to be very individualistic. And while I think that it's important for you to secure your future, I also think it's important for you to bring people along the way because I don't think everyone is free until everyone is free. You get what I'm saying? Like your
Yeah,
freedom is not real freedom until everybody's freedom is there. And
right.
so I really appreciate that you said that. All right. So now you wrote don't dumb down your greatness, right? And you have moved a lot of copies at this point, right? Like 5,000 copies for a self-published book is pretty phenomenal. And actually, the fact that the last time you did the count was in 2020, like that's pretty phenomenal. You know what I'm
Thank you.
saying? And so when you think about I think there was a moment, right, that after this book, you actually took a reverse seat. You went from being the entrepreneur to now being like, you know what, I'm gonna get another hat under my belt and I'm gonna become an EIR at Newark
Right,
Venture Partners, right? And Newark Venture Partners, it's Anthony going from being an entrepreneur to now having a seat on the investor side, right? Like to really understand what that might look like. And so
right.
tell me, how you made your way into being an EIR at MVP. And then, tell me what you learned about investment that might actually help people that are seeking to raise venture capital.
Yeah. I mean, I leverage the opportunity. We were making this is a I'm so glad we said, because I said service is the secret. A
Mhm.
lot of people, service is the secret. So us doing all these events and around Phat Start-up, giving back to the community, doing all it, creating all this value. It turns out one of the people who were the founding venture capitalists, founding investors of the fund, was a fan of the Phat Start-up.
Mm.
So he was like, "Hey, I see you're from Newark. We're starting Newark Venture Partners. The founder of Audible wants to start a venture capital fund, and we're starting it with him. How do we get you involved?"
Mhm.
It's just like, if I was someone who just kept information to myself, I wouldn't even have this opportunity.
Mhm.
So giving is receiving, like I said. But I got this opportunity, and yeah, I took it. I was like, yeah, I want to be an EIR. Now they kind of asked me what I wanted to do. They gave
Mhm.
me an option. They said, hey, look, we can build you up to get into the investment world, like actually become a VC. And I just had entrepreneurship so ingrained in me that I didn't take that route. I said, no, I want to build something, and hopefully I build something that you guys can fund one day. And they were okay with that. But as an entrepreneur in residence, um, you still can source deals, kind of bring deals to the table, bring new companies to the table, etc. What got me even to bring up the word entrepreneur in residence to them, because I never heard of that before, a guy named Tristan Walker. I saw a guy named Tristan Walker. He was the EIR for Andreessen Horowitz.
Mhm.
Um, and then when I saw him talk about his role and what he was doing at Andreessen Horowitz, when my opportunity came up, I said, I want to do the same thing he did, because that to me seemed like an ideal situation. So I kind of was like, all right, I'm gonna kind of copy this dude. I'm gonna kind of copy his moves a little bit and do exactly what he did. So that's the reason why I brought up the EIR position to them. They said, okay, we'll do it. So I helped them source deals. I helped them. And then at the meantime, I was working on things that I was thinking could be the next thing I wanted to do. And that was the deal. That was what EIR is all about. You help kind of support their investment decisions while at the same time working on whatever it is that you're doing next, with the hope that it's in line with something that they want to invest in.
Mhm.
What I've learned in the investment side is that it's completely unfair. Um,
Mhm.
it's completely unfair. I don't know what I can say. I'm gonna be honest. I gotta kind of
Okay.
hold my tongue a little bit. But what I will say is it's obvious, right? You know
Yeah.
what
Sure.
what you know is obvious. Here's one thing I would say. A lot of people are very unprepared for investment. We are
Mm.
a lot more unprepared for investment than we could have ever thought.
Mm.
And so that's something I came to realize, that many people don't understand truly what venture capital is. I think venture capital has a great PR campaign.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that it convinced people that it was a blank check.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
venture capital really, all the headlines, this person raised this much money, this person did this person did that. It really kind of it almost seemed like a lottery ticket in a
Mm.
sense. And I think a lot of people from our community approached it like that.
Mm.
They didn't understand, like, yo, the moment you take a check from someone, yo, the clock is ticking.
Mhm. Mhm.
The clock
Mhm.
is ticking. And you gotta raise more money after that. You can't just raise a check and then, you good and you building some big. No, like you gotta be forever fundraising. I don't think people understand that. The logic behind the cycle of fundraising, and that money's only supposed to last probably about 12 months, if that even. 18 months, 12 to 18 months. And then you got to go out and raise again. And then you got to raise again. And then you got to, it's a hamster wheel that I don't think people understand.
Mhm.
They think they're just going to get a big check. And then, and so, and I'm saying that they think that way because when I would talk to founders, that's exactly what they thought. Like they didn't understand the whole entire process. And so a lot of my job was kind of educating people on the actual venture capital process versus what they thought it was. What it
Mhm.
really is versus what they thought it was. That's not to say that some businesses that did come to the company, they come, were well fitted. I thought they were, but listen, I don't make investment decisions. And
Mhm.
so some of the companies that I thought could have received investment didn't. I'll give you the good example. One company that got brought up was man, I think it's a barber app. Let me see. I'm gonna tell you right now. It's one company that's $1 billion company right now that I saw them Squire.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember them.
I
Yeah.
remember when Squire and they didn't get investment because the investors simply didn't understand
Mhm.
barbershops,
Word.
black barbershops, barbershop apps. But now Squires don't just serve black barbershops. They serve
Mhm.
so many different people and so many different avenues to the point that it's literally $1 billion company now.
Mhm.
And that's an opportunity that got missed out, because the VCs that don't look like us, don't have our experiences, don't understand
Mhm.
that, and so m- that's just one example of, things that I had no control over. And then it was those moments where I was like, damn, maybe I should have joined the investment team.
Mhm.
Maybe I should have joined
Mhm.
the investment team, man. Maybe I would have, really got some things over the finish line. But I was able to help definitely get some other companies funded. Some of them are were friends of mine who had really great companies. I was able to help them. I couldn't get everybody in, but I was grateful to be able to help those that I did get in. And those that weren't ready for funding, I did my best to show them how to structure pitch decks about the venture capital ecosystem as a whole, like what it really entails and all those different things. So,
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I think one of the things that really jumped at me just now, based on what you were saying, was that I think that sometimes when you're a Black or Brown founder and you're building a product or service,
yeah.
people automatically think that what you're building is a product or service just for Black and Brown people. And I think the example that you talked about, Squire, is just like it might have started with Black barbershops, but it actually became so much more. All right. So now we're at Newark Venture Partners. I know we are like a little bit over time, but I
No,
want
we
to make
good. I
sure.
got you.
Okay, okay, okay. I want to make sure that we talk about the work that you did as an EIR. I imagine is what created ABF Creative, right? Like, tell us what is ABF Creative, because I think what's dope is that along the way, like you still have found a way to center the culture in any and everything that you do. You know what I'm saying? So even with ABF Creative, there's still a multicultural focus. And so tell us what it is and what projects you're working on, things that you're excited about the company doing or having done ever since NVP, and what your vision is for the company.
Thank you. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, at MVP, we're Newark Venture Capital, or Newark Venture Partners. It's called Newark Venture MVP Capital now. They kind of changed the name.
Hmm.
Um, it's in the same building as Audible. And so every day I was kind of interfacing with Audible employees. I would always like the desk that I sat in. Outside of my desk was a billboard, and it was always Audible advertising their next project on that billboard. And I never seen a black project. Like,
Mm,
you know what I'm saying? So I was just like, yo, where are the black stories? And I saw podcasts were becoming popular. And I was like, yo, you know what? I could do this.
mhm,
And what was interesting about podcasts is that it's not the first time I was doing podcasts. When I had my video game website, we were doing podcasts. But the kind of podcasts that were becoming popular were these narrative, documentary style, narrative, fiction, narrative, audio style podcasts. and there weren't a lot of black people doing that stuff at the time. Yeah, there were black people doing regular conversation podcasts. That was something that we can do, but nobody was doing narrative stuff. And I was like, yo, I want to throw my hat in that ring. And so yeah, I approached MVP at first, like, hey, this is what I want to do. And they were like, no. Like, this is, you want to start an audio company, like the podcast? What the hell? So I definitely got met with a no at first, and but what happened was one of the VCs there was like, listen, you go out, you get a client, a blue chip client, not just any client. They said, you go out, you get a blue chip client, we'll consider it.
Mm,
So I was like, all right, I gotta be on my hustle mode. Like, so I ended up getting Rutgers Business School as a
mm,
client, but they weren't a blue chip client. So, but they were a client. I'm like, all right, cool. I did a podcast with them, oddly enough, called VC Cheat Sheet. You can still look it up.
mhm,
And it's all about like, you know, hacks and tips on venture capital for minorities of color. And then for people of color. And then eventually I leveraged that to get a to get Prudential Financial as a client. Once I got
mm.
them, then I was like, "Oh,
Now that's
everybody said,
blue
okay,
chip.
we got a business," because that was the
Mhm,
most money we've ever received.
mhm,
I believe that job was worth about $20,000, which, you know, at the time, that was a lot of money for us. So you gotta understand, we got no money to do
mhm,
anything. Matter of fact, we did that Rutgers podcast for like $1,000.
mm,
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that was a podcast we did on the cheap. So when we were able to kind of turn around and get a $20,000 job, that changed my outlook, and it changed the way, at least the venture capital fund looked at me, and it was like, oh, you know what, maybe you could be able to turn this into something. So they were doing an accelerator. It was the last cohort ever for the accelerator. They said, all right, and we got one more spot. You can get in there. And it turned out well. I ended up um, pitching at the demo day. From that demo day, Morgan Stanley loved what we were doing. They wrote me another check. Then MVP followed on and gave another check, and then I was able to raise another angel round as well. So all together, it was all part of an ultimate C round. I think we didn't raise $1 million, but we raised damn near close to it, maybe like 850,000 altogether, and that was our seed. That was the seed money that I was able to raise to start ABF Creative. And what we are is, a multicultural kids and family podcast production company. And so the reason why a lot of people are like, why are you focused on kids? Okay. The reason why we're focused on kids is because during the pandemic, before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of like, podcasts on gun violence. Nobody listened. I'll be honest with you. Nobody listened. We did podcasts on like just venture capital. Remember that one? Nobody listened. We
mhm.
did podcasts on a whole bunch of stuff that was super black. Nobody listened. And then during the pandemic, um, I said, oh, you know what? There are a lot of black kids at home right now.
Mhm,
Um, they're not getting education. Let's create something that's going to edify them. That's still entertaining. So I said, what's something that we could get a lot of, but we don't have to pay for? And I thought about African folk tales because they teach a
mm,
lesson. They're free because they're stories that would be passed down from generation to generation. So we don't have to worry about copyrights.
mhm,
Um, so what we can do is throw a little imagination in there. I thought about the Magic School Bus and was like, oh, what if we had a storyteller that's like the Black Miss Frizzle? So we threw in this
mm,
magical narrator in there, and I put it out as a way to help kids during the pandemic. The reception we received from that was phenomenal, and it was the most listeners we have ever received for any of the podcasts we've ever created up to that point. And that's when we realized we are truly filling a void.
mhm,
And then that's what I realized in entrepreneurship, another lesson, which was sometimes when you don't have a niche, people don't know how to help you.
Mhm.
Because there was a lot of people who I had support from, and they're like, "Oh, Anthony, go after it. You got this, brother. You got this." But they never really can offer any tangible way to help me. They
Mhm.
just so support, just like, well, we thumbs up, brother, you know.
Mhm.
But when I told them, yo, I'm making a kids and family podcast production company and network, they were like, oh, you got to meet this person. Oh, you got to talk to this person. Oh, let me introduce you to, oh, let me do this. Oh, I got a contract. Oh, I got people knew how to help me. And so that's something I would tell a lot of entrepreneurs like, yo, like, it's not enough to say I'm doing things for the Black community. That's not specific enough.
Mhm.
You got to get a little bit more specific so people know how they can help you directly.
Mhm.
And so when I got specific and people knew how to help me, that's when success started to come.
Mhm.
So, and to this day, we've put out numerous kids and family podcasts, Adventures of Cairo, which is one of the top, rated kids podcasts, especially Black kids podcasts ever. We did that with Wondery. African Folktales still gets a consistent 30,000 people listening a month to that. Charm Words, we do a daily affirmations podcast for kids. That one gets about 100,000 listeners a month. We do 5-minute mysteries. We got Charm Words in Espanol. We're gonna bring that back. We put that on hiatus, but it was one of the number one podcasts in Spanish speaking countries.
Mm.
So we're very happy about that. And then we partner with other companies too. We don't just do our own podcast, but we do stuff with companies like Ben and Jerry's, Audible, and so many others. And so, yeah, it's not just always kids and family. We just did a podcast with Sterling K. Brown with him and his wife, which we've been able to receive 2 NAACP Image Award nominations for.
Ooh,
And so
great.
it's been a fun ride, and we were excited about what's next for sure.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Anthony? What is next? Because I just feel like you always got something cooking. Like, I know earlier you mentioned that you might actually start a new book. Like, what can people expect from you from 2025 and beyond? You could also be like, mind your business.
No, no,
I'm
it's
more
all good.
private.
More content. I used to be, when we were doing Phat Start-up and back in my days, we were content creators. We were so big on content. Ever since I become an entrepreneur more deeply in building this company, it demanded so much from me.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm preaching to the choir right now because this, right? It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, and a lot of people underestimate how much mental energy,
Mhm.
creative energy it takes to run a company, because when I get home, I'm tapped out. When I'm done with, sometimes I'm tapped out. So a lot of 2024, end of 2024, moving into 2025 is getting that energy back
Mhm.
and creating more content that can help people in entrepreneurship and creative, um and being of service, and how that can help open up doors of opportunity for yourself. So I'm going to create a lot more content around that. Launching a new podcast myself as well around that. So I'm looking to launch that very soon. I won't put a date on it because then everybody gonna be like, "Oh, we're
Where is it
very
at?
soon, very soon, very soon. It's coming. I promise." But just really growing ABF Creative, and running this business, and figuring out ways to uh, leverage the IP that we've been able to create into other avenues, books, and YouTube channels and different things like that out of the IP that we've been able to create. So I'm very much looking forward to doing more work that in that realm.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to seeing everything that you're going to be building out and bringing to the world. Honestly, Anthony, you blessed us with a lot of information today. I want to thank you for your generosity, for dropping gems on us. And for me, this has just been such a cool episode because it was me asking questions, but it was also like, I really feel like we came up together in many ways. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
And
right.
so,
No, we did,
um,
we did, we
we
did.
really
You
did.
do, yo. I want to give you your kudos. You like I said before, like you you've done way more than I could have ever imagined with this business. Um, and just like super proud of how far you've come and how far you even have to go. The world is your oyster at this point. You ain't get to London yet, you know what I mean? And you ain't get to Switzerland yet and all those other places, Australia. Like it's so much more for you to conquer, with the work that you're doing. So I'm super proud.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Anthony, where can people find you if they're trying to connect?
Easiest way to find me is to hit me on Instagram at Anthony Frasier, ANTHONYFRASIER. Shoot me a DM, follow me, shoot me a DM, whatever. And that's the easiest way. It's better than email. Trust me. You don't want to email me.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for everyone who listened today. Leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on social media. Thank you so much, Anthony. This was such a pleasure, and we will talk again real soon.
Real soon.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Work. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating and a review. Follow us on YouTube and on social media. I want to hear how this show is leaving an impact on you.